Let me ask you something. What would drive a billionaire to follow his maid after work? Suspicion? Arrogance? Or something darker? That question haunted Gregory Whitmore, a 61-year-old real estate tycoon, known for his sharp suits and even sharper instincts. He had built Whitmore and King Realty into one of the most powerful property empires on the West Coast, believing in one principle: control everything, trust no one. So when his wife couldn't find her $25,000 sapphire bracelet, the same one she claimed to have worn just the day before, Gregory didn't hesitate. He didn't search the house, didn't ask his staff gently. He walked straight into the kitchen where Olivia Bennett, the 36-year-old black maid he had employed for 8 months, was drying her hands. "Olivia, empty your pockets." That was it. No explanation. No hello. Just command. Now here's where the story begins to twist. Olivia turned slowly, her posture calm, eerily calm. She didn't flinch, didn't ask why. Her eyes met his, and for the first time, Gregory saw something he hadn't noticed before in her gaze. Poise. Not submission. Not guilt. Something else entirely. A quiet confidence that rattled him more than any denial could have. "Is there a problem, Mr. Whitmore?" she asked, voice level but firm. "My wife's bracelet is missing. You cleaned her room. That's all I need to know." He crossed his arms like a judge ready to deliver a sentence, not realizing this wasn't a courtroom. It was a trap, one he had walked straight into without reading the warning signs. What Gregory didn't know, what most men like him never understand, is that the most dangerous person in the room is the one you think you have power over. "I see," Olivia said, folding the dish towel neatly, "and you've already decided it was me." "Interesting." Gregory narrowed his eyes. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. You have a daughter to support, right? Things get tough. Maybe you got confused about what belonged to you." Now here's where things snapped. Olivia smiled. Not a shy smile. Not a frightened one. This was the smile of someone who had been waiting for this exact moment. "Before I empty my pockets," she said, pulling out her phone in deliberate slow motion, "how about we call the police? I'm sure they'd love to investigate a $25,000 theft." Gregory hesitated. This wasn't right. She wasn't supposed to act like this. That's not necessary if you just cooperate. "Oh, but I insist," Olivia interrupted, and for the first time, she wasn't speaking like a maid. She sounded like a prosecutor about to open a case. Then her phone buzzed and she glanced at it, that smile widening just enough to set off alarm bells in Gregory's head. "Perfect timing," she said under her breath. "Looks like I'll have visitors sooner than expected." She emptied her pockets, keys, a pack of gum, a tissue, nothing else. Gregory didn't even get to react before the doorbell rang. Once, then twice, then again. The sound sliced through the marble hall like a warning shot. "I'm sorry, Mr. Whitmore," she said with a polite nod, "but I have a feeling our conversation is just getting started." Now pause for a second. If you're watching this and wondering how a simple accusation snowballed into a corporate nightmare, stay with me. Because when Olivia opened that door, the past and karma came storming in like a tidal wave. Standing there wasn't just one guest. There were four. Three women, each with a quiet dignity, and one sharply dressed man holding a leather briefcase. "Mr. Whitmore," Olivia said, her voice now laced with steel, "this is Mrs. Jenkins, Mrs. Harmon, and Mrs. Ellis. They all worked for you in the past, and all were fired under suspicion of theft." Gregory's jaw twitched. He remembered the faces, vaguely. Dismissed them years ago. No severance, no apologies, just ruined reputations. "And this," Olivia said, turning to the man, "is Elijah Monroe, civil rights attorney, employment discrimination specialist, and my legal counsel." Gregory's face turned white. Elijah stepped forward with the kind of calm that only comes from knowing your case is airtight. "Mr. Whitmore," he began, "for the past 8 months, my client has been documenting a pattern of racial profiling, false accusations, and workplace intimidation within this residence. Today, we present that evidence." Now Gregory exploded. "This is outrageous. You come into my home, and accuse me? I have every right to protect my property." Olivia stepped forward, calm as ever. "No, Mr. Whitmore. You have a history of targeting black women with unfounded accusations. You called Mrs. Ellis a thief. Her reputation was ruined. The ring turned up in your guest bathroom drawer weeks later. Mrs. Jenkins nodded solemnly. You told me I was lucky to get this job, then fired me when $100 bill went missing. I found it stuck under your couch a week later. You never said sorry. Gregory couldn't look at them, and that's when Olivia dropped the final blow. Mr. Whitmore, she said, lifting her phone again. 3 weeks ago, you told your wife I looked like I'd steal if I had the chance. She hit play, and there it was, his voice. This Olivia seems perfect. When something goes missing, we'll have our scapegoat. The room fell dead silent. Elijah placed files on the table. Transcripts, voice recordings, dates, statements, and then Olivia walked to the mantel. She reached behind a wedding photo and pulled out the missing bracelet. It was right where your wife left it, she said softly. I saw it this morning, but I waited because I wanted to see how far you'd go. Gregory staggered backward. Everything, his confidence, his power, his certainty, shattered in a single moment. And here's the truth. He never saw her coming, because in his mind she was invisible, just a maid. But Olivia Bennett had spent those 8 months not just cleaning his house, but collecting receipts. This chapter isn't just about a false accusation. It's about how quiet observation, intelligence, and preparation can turn the tables on the powerful. Personally, I find it incredibly satisfying when those underestimated rise up not with rage, but with receipts. Olivia didn't just defend herself. She dismantled a legacy of arrogance in one move. If you felt that twist in your gut, just wait. Gregory Whitmore didn't sit down. He collapsed. His legs gave out like the truth had punched through every inch of his ego. For over 6 decades, he believed he knew people, knew how to spot weakness, how to exploit silence. That belief had built him an empire, but now that same arrogance had left him surrounded by women he discarded and a woman he never really saw at all. Elijah Monroe, ever calm, took control of the room. Mr. Whitmore, he said, opening a large folder, my client has evidence that, over the past 5 years, 12 women, black women, were terminated from this household on unsubstantiated grounds. No formal investigations, no apologies, just termination and silence. I have every right to fire staff, Gregory started. No one's challenging your right to terminate employees, Elijah replied. We're challenging your pattern, a pattern that shows a clear bias, a reliance on racist assumptions, and an abuse of power. Gregory's hand hovered near his phone. I have lawyers. I'll bury this. Please call them, Olivia said with that unnerving calm. Let's see how many answered tonight. He did. The first, Harvey Lang, responded with, Greg, I can't represent you. Conflict of interest. The second, sorry, Greg. Our firm is already in contact with the opposing party. The third, didn't even pick up. Gregory's face went pale. Now I have to jump in here as a narrator. This part right here, this is when the predator realizes he's not holding a gun. He's holding the trigger to his own downfall. Olivia didn't gloat. She simply sat down across from him like a professor before a lecture. For 8 months, she said, I watched, listened, recorded. I scrubbed your floors while hearing you mock people who look like me. I dusted your bookshelves while you bragged on the phone about manipulating zoning laws and bribing safety inspectors. I smiled while your wife called me the help and asked me to stay out of sight when guests came over. She stood and walked to a tall bookcase. I also planted recorders, here, here, and here. She pulled 3 small digital devices from inside hollowed books. Gregory's jaw dropped. You think no one listens, she continued, but some of us have made a career out of listening. Then Elijah dropped the first true bombshell. My client, Ms. Olivia Bennett, is not a domestic worker by trade. She holds a master's degree in investigative journalism from Columbia University. She was a senior reporter at the Seattle Tribune. She lost that job after beginning an investigation into discriminatory hiring and firing practices among elite real estate developers. Gregory blinked. Wait. You're... Yes, Olivia said. The woman who wrote the expose on Hastings Group, the one who almost brought down the mayor's office. He remembered that article. He hated that article. After my dismissal, Olivia continued, I needed income. So I took this job. But when I started noticing the things your wife said, the way you looked at me, the way other staff disappeared without cause, I realized this wasn't just another rich household. It was a pattern, a story, and stories like yours need to be told. She pulled up her phone again, a live feed. Over 27,000 people were now watching. This is illegal, Gregory snapped. You're violating my privacy. You invited these violations, Elijah interrupted, by speaking freely in front of someone you believed had no power, no voice. Mrs. Harmon, who had been silent, finally spoke. I lost my home after you fired me. You said I stole a silver spoon. You told the agency I was probably undocumented. I'm not. I'm a U.S. citizen with a daughter in law school. Mrs. Ellis followed. You told me I looked suspicious and that my kind didn't belong in a house like this. I was a social worker before I took this job. I needed income after a medical emergency. You treated me like garbage. Gregory tried to speak, but no sound came out. Then Olivia leaned in. Remember Thursday mornings, she asked, when you'd have calls in the library while I vacuumed the hallway? He looked at her, horrified. I recorded everything. She placed 4 more devices on the table, then another 2 from behind the curtain rods. You had no idea how much you talked when you thought no one important was listening. Elijah began spreading out photographs, scans of forged safety reports, audio clips of bribes being arranged, text messages discussing ways to get rid of staff without lawsuits. And then came the final dagger. Olivia reached into her bag and pulled out a flash drive. This, she said, contains a recording from 3 weeks ago. You told your CFO that firing me would be easy PR because your donors loved a scandal involving dishonest help. Gregory lunged forward, but Elijah was faster. If you lay a hand on her, he said quietly, you'll be in jail before you can blink. Gregory froze. His breathing was shallow now. And then, Olivia pulled the curtain back even further. My daughter never needed college money, she said. She graduated 5 years ago. Those weekends I said I was working double shifts. I was following you, recording you, photographing you, handing off unmarked envelopes to building inspectors, gathering your financial records, connecting the dots. Gregory collapsed into a chair. All the power was gone. The fear in his eyes, that was new, but the shame, that was decades overdue. Why are you doing this? He whispered. Olivia paused, then knelt in front of him. Because men like you ruin lives and never look back. Because you hide behind your wealth. Because you made women like me feel invisible for so long, until we became unstoppable. She stood. And because your empire is about to fall. Not because I destroyed it, but because you built it on hate, and I simply pulled back the curtain. Just then, Gregory's phone lit up. He had 47 missed calls, voicemails, texts, emails. 3 business partners had pulled out. His face turned ghostly. The doorbell rang. Again. This time it was the Seattle police. Mr. Whitmore, said the detective, we have a warrant. We need to search the premises. This isn't just about racial injustice. This is about how silence doesn't mean ignorance. How those who sweep the floors often see what's hiding in the corners. Personally, I find this moment to be one of the most satisfying turns. When the woman deemed invisible becomes the most powerful voice in the room, and the man who thought he controlled everything can't even control his own downfall. Detectives moved through the Whitmore estate like a storm had finally come to a house built on lies. Gregory Whitmore, once the untouchable titan of real estate, now sat slumped on his own Italian leather sofa, watching the foundation of his world crack under the weight of truth. One officer uncovered a locked drawer behind his wine cellar. Inside, falsified inspection reports, signed but never filed. Stacks of blank checks with city officials' names scribbled on Post-it notes. Property blueprints marked for overvaluation. Every corner of his house whispered secrets he thought would never speak. And Olivia, she didn't flinch once. While investigators cataloged every artifact of Gregory's downfall, she stood with quiet dignity, her phone still streaming the moment live to an audience that had now surpassed 58,000 viewers. Comments flooded in. "She's a genius. This is justice. This is how we change the system." But there were other comments too, rage-filled ones. "He destroyed these women's lives. I hope he rots. Too many Gregory Whitmores out there. This is just one." And it was true. Gregory wasn't unique. He was a symptom, a symbol, and that's what made Olivia's victory more than personal. It was collective. As the search continued, Gregory tried a last-ditch whisper into his phone. "Raymond, listen, I need you to talk to Judge Keller. Call in that favor." But Olivia's voice cut across the room like glass breaking. "You should save your breath." She walked over and dropped a thick envelope on the coffee table. It contained bank records, emails, and audio clips. Everything tied directly to the judges, the brokers, the city officials who had enabled him. Elijah added, "The same judge you're calling has just been notified by the ethics committee. We've already filed a formal complaint. And this," he held up a second folder, "is the list of journalists CC'd on that complaint." Gregory's hand shook. He looked like a man finally realizing there would be no back door. No old friend to save him. No hush money to plug the hole in the dam. Only consequences. "You ruined me," he whispered. "No," Olivia said. "You ruined yourself. I just turned the lights on." That's when the officers found it. In a compartment beneath Gregory's desk drawer, a second set of books. Hidden ledgers showing how he'd inflated building costs by millions, billing the city for work never done. 12 projects, 6 neighborhoods, entire communities robbed under the guise of development. One detective turned to another. This just went federal. Gregory stood in a daze. For the first time, his voice had no menace, no bite, just a quiet, frightened murmur. "What do I do now?" Olivia stepped forward, not to gloat, but to tell him what no one else ever had the courage to say. "You listen, you watch, and maybe, you finally learn what it feels like to be powerless in a system built to ignore you." Gregory was let out in handcuffs. As the door closed behind him, Olivia finally let out a breath she hadn't known she'd been holding for 8 long months. The women gathered around her, Mrs. Jenkins, Mrs. Ellis, and Mrs. Harmon. They hugged, not as survivors, but as sisters. Warriors who had waited far too long to be believed. 6 months later, a skyline once dominated by Gregory's towers now had a new silhouette. The Bennett Center for Investigative Journalism, located in the heart of downtown Seattle. Olivia's story had become a national movement. Her expose on Gregory wasn't just a viral hit, it became a Pulitzer Prize-winning feature. Her book, Invisible by Design, The Real Faces of Power, had remained on the bestseller list for 16 weeks and was being adapted into a docuseries by Netflix. But more importantly, her voice sparked others. Dozens of women reached out, maids, nurses, cashiers, journalists, teachers. "I saw what you did," one letter read, "and I realized I wasn't crazy. I wasn't alone." One young woman wrote, "I used to think no one would ever believe me, but after watching your video, I walked into HR with confidence. I had proof. I had courage. I had your story." And Olivia? She wasn't done. She created a nonprofit, the Second Voice Initiative, aimed at providing legal aid and media support for Black women wrongfully terminated or targeted in the workplace. She used her settlement not for a penthouse, but for scholarships. She hired the very women Gregory fired to work at her new firm, not as staff, but as managers. Meanwhile, Gregory's world crumbled with poetic precision. 3 felony charges, 27 lawsuits, his company dissolved, properties seized. He now lived in a modest apartment, rent-controlled ironically, in the very district he once called undesirable. Every time he turned on the news, there she was, Olivia Bennett being honored at City Hall, giving TED talks, standing beside governors proposing legislation for anti-discrimination reforms. Closing scene. The final scene of this story doesn't take place in a courtroom. It doesn't take place in the boardroom either. It takes place in a tiny high school auditorium in Rainier Valley. A teenage girl, Black, with braids like Olivia's daughter once had, steps onto a stage. She's holding a speech. She pauses, looking nervous. But in the front row sits Olivia, smiling. That girl breathes in and speaks. My name is Aaliyah Carter, and I used to think my voice didn't matter. Until I read about a maid who brought down a billionaire by telling the truth. The crowd erupts in applause. In that moment, everything Olivia suffered made sense. She hadn't just taken down a corrupt man. She had built a ladder for others to climb over the same wall that had once kept her out. This story didn't end with revenge. It ended with revolution. It's not just about Gregory's fall. It's about Olivia's rise. And it's about the people, like you, like me, who choose to listen, to believe, and to act. Personally, I don't just feel inspired. I feel called to question. Who are the people I overlook? Who's cleaning my office, delivering my packages, waiting tables? And what silent brilliance might be hiding behind their smile? Because sometimes the most underestimated person in the room is the one who changes everything. If this story made you feel something, hope, rage, justice, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because we'll keep telling stories that matter, stories that reveal the truth, stories that give voice to the invisible. If this story made you feel something, anger, hope, or even pride, don't scroll away. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe, because we're not done telling the stories that others try to silence. Sometimes the most underestimated voice becomes the one that changes everything. Bin Luan Gim, pinned comment, Gai Trang Luan and Tuong Tash. Do you think Olivia went too far by setting him up so thoroughly? Or was this the justice he deserved? Let's talk about it in the comments. Would you have done the same in her shoes or walked away quietly? Also, what would you do if your boss accused you of something you didn't do, just because of who you are? The more we share, the more we learn. Drop your thoughts below. Down.